we have in Puerto Rico the catastrophic destruction in the whole island. We see thousand houses destroyed, the loss of electricity. Then we have a time without water and food. We see people die because you don't have medicines, oxygen, the insulin in the refrigerator. That was very, very hard to us to see that.
The island of Puerto Rico has had 3 severe hurricanes in just 6 years. And, as global temperatures continue to rise, extreme weather events are only becoming more common. So I am on my way to the airport for an early flight to see what lessons the people of Puerto Rico can teach me about local resilience to the global crisis of climate change.
We are going to meet local leaders who cleaned up after the devastation of Hurricane Maria, as well as people who are developing green farming practices and renewable energy to help rebuild the island for a more sustainable future.
Reverend Nilsa Salicetti and her husband Tony served as our guides and translators, while we took in the lush island paradise. From beaches to palm trees to mountains, Puerto Rico has it all. Once we got settled in, Mary Ellen spoke to an environmental sociologist about the effects of hurricanes.
I know the climate is changing all around the world, and we are seeing a global rise in environmental disasters. But why did Hurricane Maria affect the people of Puerto Rico so severely?
Puerto Rico was so impacted because of their socio-demographic conditions. There is people who bear the brunt of the consequences of climate change. People who live under the poverty level are the most affected because they have the less chances of being able to cope. Female head of households are particularly vulnerable, children under the age of 5 and elderly above the age of 65. These are socio-demographic characteristics that makes vulnerability an issue because people have less resources to cope, to anticipate and cope the impact of natural events. And the problem with climate change is that it's bringing natural events that are more extreme and more common in our areas. So it becomes a spiral of vulnerability.
How has Puerto Rico's response to Hurricane Maria sped up the move towards green energy and other local sustainable ways of life?
That has been very interesting because before Hurricane Maria, the renewable energy was like a promise for savings. But after Hurricane Maria, it was more than saving money, it was about saving lives. So the blackout after Hurricane Maria lasted 329 days. And in that process, a lot of people lost their lives because of lack of electric service. So people who didn't have electricity to power refrigeration, for example, died because of lack of insulin. Or people who had respiratory illness didn't have access to machines for respiratory therapy. So it changed from saving money to saving lives.
What can people do to create a future where Puerto Rico is more prepared for the next hurricane than it was for Maria?
you need to be politically involved in good times, not wait until the bad times to come. If the conditions that you were living before the hurricane were subpar, you don't want to restore those subpar conditions that were the cause for the disaster in the first place. So you need to, instead of bouncing back to pre-existing conditions, you want to leap forward to a better Puerto Rico, a better society, right? And that means less income inequality, that means more education, that means less poverty in general. So get involved in good times.
To truly appreciate the vulnerability of the people, you have to get away from the easily accessible places. So we held on for dear life while whipping through the twists and turns of a narrow country road on our way up to the island's remote interior mountains. This is a path most tourists fear to tread. But the payoff is spectacular, because out here, everything teems with life and color. At a Methodist camp nestled high in the mountains, we listened to stories about the destruction of the storm.
Everything here, as you can see, is green. And when Hurricane Maria passed by the island, everything was brown. The storm was very strong. There was trees all over the place. It looks like a bomb exploded. The ceilings blew away, so everything that was inside the houses just, got wet and filled with leaves and branches and everything. So there was a lot of damage in the houses of the people here. It was hard.
Despite the damage, Norris and her husband, Jose, decided to rebuild the camp.
The mission of this place is to serve the community. Camp Carson, they call it the face of heaven in the earth. There are many things to do around here. You never get bored. You never get bored, yeah. This has been something very special for me. The experience that you get here because the environment and the space that you have here, you get the contact with the nature. Going around, hiking, exploring the forest, you can see the hand of God right here. I live in San Juan. A problem that I have is that when I arrive here, sometimes it's difficult to turn back to San Juan. Yeah, I love this place.
Camp Corson encourages people to make connections with green space, which can help us learn to protect the world we live in. But the area around the camp was hit hard by Maria. The storm knocked out the power grid for the whole island, and this region went without electricity for almost an entire year. More than 3,000 people died in the aftermath of Maria, and most of those deaths are attributed to complications from what became the longest blackout in U.S. history.
Bishop Hector Ortiz traveled the island in the aftermath of the storm and decided to do something to prepare people for the next time the grid goes down. So he turned the Methodist Church of Puerto Rico's conference center into a solar-powered disaster shelter for future storms.
The Methodist spirituality here in Puerto Rico and in the mainland is to cultivate not only personal holiness but social holiness. We have the commitment to support our brothers and sisters. For that reason, the Methodist Church Puerto Rico established that we need to move all our churches to solar energy because that is the future. Thanks to the support of the people of the United Methodist Church, we received a grant and we use that grant to put here in the main office a solar system to have electricity 24 hours, 7 days in the week, and to have here a center for people that don't have electricity may came here to receive energy. The move of our churches to renewable energy is a matter of life and death. We need to fight in favor of the life of the whole planet, the life of our families, because the problem of the climate change is a problem for all human beings. We need to understand that that is a reality. The environment is made by God, and we have the commitment to become good stewards of the creation. We need to save the planet. That is social holiness.
In addition to the lack of power, Hurricane Maria wiped out 80% of the island's crops, and it took an average of more than 2 months for food and water to arrive from the mainland. In the years since the disaster, many Puerto Rican residents have come to value local, sustainable farming practices that resist supply chain disruption and use green techniques to strengthen the crops against storms.
At Jean-Marie Chocolat, we met Juan, who is using natural farming practices to grow a world-class cacao industry that supports local farmers.
We are committed to produce the best chocolate in the world. Puerto Rico is a small island, so we cannot compete with other big countries in terms of production. So we need to focus on quality. There is a huge market for what we call fine and flavored chocolate, which is a special chocolate that needs special cacao beans, the one that we are planting right now in the island. The farmers had to buy grafted trees. They know the techniques how to manage the right way the farms. So they are producing the cacao we want. We are processing the way it's supposed to be produced to maintain the quality. And we identify the market out there who will like to work with that particular quality of cacao beans. This work is very important because what we are trying to develop is an industry. At the same time, we are applying certain farming practices for conservation to develop the farm without using as less machinery as possible. We are not using chemicals in our farm. We adopt the approach of natural farming. Every action that you do in your farm or in your site in some manner affect the environment, and you can do it in the good way or in the bad way. The people recognize the need to produce our own food, and once the people start farming cacao, they start farming other crops, and that's what we're looking for. So we planted cacao, we planted bananas, plantains, and other things. And what happened is that you have an environment there where some trees are taking something from the soil, but adding other nutrients to the soil. We are using, for example, the conch of the cacao, putting back in the farm to use like a fertilizer, natural fertilizer for the farm. That's a win-win situation for farming, because you don't need to use the chemical fertilizers, because the same system is giving back the nutrient that the different plants need. So some use something and the other provide it, and back and forward. And that's a technique that was used for a long time. That's why we have the jungle. You see the jungle or the forest, all the trees living together, very happy. Nobody put nothing there, and they stay there for centuries. So what we are trying to do is doing the same, but in a productive forest.
Although Juan has been farming sustainably since before the hurricane, even he picked up some new ideas after Maria, like organizing crops into terraces to let rainwater shed without causing mudslides. But it is impossible to protect yourself against all damage from severe storms. When everything was said and done, Maria caused over $90 billion of destruction. Volunteers came to the island from around the world to help people rebuild their lives and their homes.
We sat down with Milton Santiago, who helped coordinate teams that worked on nearly 1,200 homes.
Hasta el día de hoy,
I have been working with Rihashi for 3 years. It has given me the opportunity to see how many needs there are on our island. The most common damage is the lack of roofing because the roof collapsed from the wind. I feel we have made a difference because we have been able to visit each person, knock on their door, and give them hope. There is nothing more important than seeing someone return to their home with a structure that is safe.
Kathy DeCreedy has led multiple teams from East Ohio to repair the damage in Puerto Rico.
We journeyed to Puerto Rico to help in the rebuilding process. Journeys impact and continue to work on our lives, unlike a trip or perhaps traveling has a starting point and a stopping point. And journey impacts our life before the journey and during the journey and after the journey. We saw roofs that were tarped with blue tarp. We saw houses that were completely destroyed. We didn't just see devastation in infrastructure, we saw devastation in people's lives. It's hard for the church to link climate justice to disasters because we get as complacent as the world does. I think that we're also afraid to upset our biggest donors in our churches who don't have the same understanding about creation care. And so we don't want to talk about stuff that has become a political issue and has divided folks. And it feels like it's not a safe conversation to have when it's really a faithful conversation to have. As a Christ follower, Scripture tells us to go, to not just sit at home or sit in our holy huddle or sit in a church building and worship, but to go and take care of people, be a helping hand, to come alongside and be with people in their moments of crisis. The group spent a lot of time repairing cement roofs and redoing drywall and putting homes back to the place where they had been before they were hurricane damaged. One of the most joyful things was building community and meeting people, experiencing the culture, experiencing radical hospitality and people being so grateful that you were there to help, that they hadn't been forgotten. Being a volunteer in mission can be really beautiful. For some people, it means to be taking their faith out into the world and putting feet and hands and heart to it. For others, it might be a place where they discover faith. For some, it means leaving the world better than we found it. It made a big impact on me to the point where I took another team back in 2019 and continued to train up and equip and resource team leaders to take more journeys back to Puerto Rico in the rebuilding efforts.
At this small community of houses in a high valley, Hurricane Maria created a 200-mile-per-hour wind tunnel. We visited with one of the homeowners and discussed the difference it made when Milton and Kathy helped them rebuild their home. Even after years of work, the restoration of the house was still a work in progress. But she was filled with gratitude for the people who helped put a roof back over their heads.
Pues yo diría que todos los muebles.
The whole house was destroyed. The roof and the ceiling collapsed. The kitchen and furniture were ruined. Everything was gone. The flood was up to my knees. There was no food, no water, no medicine. We were without power for around 6 months. FEMA denied our claim because we did not have the right kind of deed in our home. It took 4 years to get the house fixed. It was marvelous when the people from Rihashi came to help. Good, good, good. I praise the Lord for sending the team to help us. We are very grateful for that.
Gracias, Señor, porque pues los envío a ustedes.
The whirlwind of Hurricane Maria changed Puerto Rico forever. On this tropical paradise, people do not have the luxury of pretending climate change isn't real. When our time on the island came to an end, we said goodbye to Tony and Nilsa. Today, 6 years have come and gone since the storm. Most of the buildings have been repaired, rebuilt, or left behind, or are still being restored. But I was impressed by the lessons the people of Puerto Rico have learned from the experience. Many of them are choosing to recreate their lives in ways that are more sustainable. They protect the green spaces they love. They generate green energy while preparing themselves for the next time the grid goes down. They are developing green agriculture by using more natural farming practices. And they help each other get back on their feet after life-changing disasters. Unfortunately, shortly after we left to come home, the people of Puerto Rico were hit by another hurricane that caused severe flooding and power outages. As global temperatures continue to rise, scientists only expect to see more extreme weather as the years go on. So, while the climate changes rapidly around the world, I can't help but wonder, what lessons can we learn out of the whirlwind?